Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 252 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from a 2-week trip to Denver, Colorado to do some consulting work. While I was there, I also got to record a show with 3 members of the Thornton Fire Department who had a Mayday event that they shared their story with me. That'll be a 3-part interview starting on March 19th. Next week, I'll kick off part 1 of a 2-part interview with the Elyria Fire Department Assistant Chief, Joe Prenesti, talking about the challenges of fighting fires in buildings on Main Street, USA. Stick around after the feature segment is done here, and I will tell you where the SAMatters tour is headed next. We have a busy couple of months coming up, and maybe I'll be in a town near you. Today's feature segment is an interview with Dr. Burt Clark. A couple of months ago, I shared a message on my social media that caused some concern for Dr. Clark, that perhaps I was sending the wrong message to the fire service. I could have just called him and talked it out over the phone, but instead he agreed to come onto the show and to have this discussion publicly. This interview actually serves 2 purposes. First, you get to hear from an iconic thought leader in the fire service. And second, and perhaps even more importantly, you can witness how 2 people can agree to disagree on a topic without being mean-spirited toward each other. This is unfortunately a lost skill in today's society. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, my discussion with Dr. Burt Clark on assumed risk versus created risk. Today I'm with Burt Clark, what I would call a longtime friend and certainly a significant influencer in the fire service. And this is his second time being a guest on the Situational Awareness Matters show. Way back in January 13th of 2015. Wow. Yeah, I know. Dr. Clark was a guest on episode 38 when the show was in its infancy, and because we're up to, I think this is probably going to end up being episode 250 something in the series, and we were talking about then a new book that he had written, and I'm sure we're going to have a conversation about that as well. But Dr. Clark, welcome to the show, and let's start off with you letting the listeners and the viewers learn a little bit about you.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate the opportunity once again. Even though we haven't done this, I certainly follow you. I followed you for a long time. So we have been friends and colleagues for quite a while. And more important than that, I think we think a lot alike in terms of trying to answer the tough questions. And as best as possible, using science and research to help us do that. So I appreciate your approach to this. And we've actually been on the same programs together at the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute Leadership and Command Program. I mean,
Right.
you were on one day, or I was on the other day, or something like that. So we've done that a couple of times together.
Right.
I've attended your workshops at FDIC all over. So it's been great knowing you, Rich. My background, as you said, I've been around a long time. Joined the fire service in 1970. So I guess I'm a senior citizen, not only in the eyes of Social Security, but the fire service also. And have just loved every minute of it. Rode fire trucks for quite a while. I guess about 2010, I stopped riding fire trucks. Was a career firefighter in Washington, D.C., was a volunteer in Prince George's County and Carroll County, Maryland. Started out at the world famous Kentland Volunteer Fire Department, Company 33 in Prince George's County. So there's a shout out to them. And retired in 2014 from the National Fire Academy after being there some 34 years. So it was just a wonderful blessing to be in the fire service. I'm certainly a poster child for firefighter cancer. I've survived prostate cancer and also a heart attack. So I have 3 stents in my heart. So been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and I'm going to keep talking about stuff until I can't anymore. And that's my responsibility today, because I don't squirt water. I don't swing axes. I couldn't even if I wanted to, but I certainly can share some thoughts and ideas. So I appreciate this opportunity to do that with your following, which is worldwide. And I do appreciate your hard work, because I know how tough it is out there to get those gigs around the world. And you are the toughest working guy in the fire service. So I applaud you for that. So thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you for those kind words. And I know you're working pretty hard to get an important message out there as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we want to talk about today. So let me kick it off with this. On January 9th, 2019, on my social media feeds of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, I posted a message, and I'm going to read the message because it is really the basis of why we're together having this conversation. So the message said, firefighters will die in ways that are not predictable or preventable. And to that, I agree that we cannot stop it. And perhaps our efforts would be best spent not trying to prevent every line of duty death. Let's spend our efforts reducing the preventable and predictable line of duty deaths. And there's a huge difference between assuming risk and creating risk. We always assume the risk of the job, but there are too many out there creating risk because they lack training and or experience, or they are consumed by the bravado of being perceived the hero at all costs. And when I posted that, I got some discussion and some feedback, of which some of it was from you, and you were certainly professional enough to send me a private message and said, Rich, I'd like to talk with you about that message. And we had a little conversation on the private messenger, indicating that that my message might have caused some concern and perhaps even been misconstrued by some who read it. And you wanted to kind of clear that with me. And I thought, well, this is a great conversation, but let's do it on a podcast where other people can kind of like voyeuristically listen in to 2 old goats having a conversation like we were, sitting around a coffee table. Yeah. and chatting. And that's kind of how I want this to flow. And just let them listen in and see what pearls can be drawn from you as it relates to this topic. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and kind of let you frame up what your concern was and why you would maybe want a different message shared than the one that I shared.
Well, it's not just a one-way street, Rich, because I value your feedback also, because I think we are much closer in our thinking about the fire service than we are apart. So we agree on more things than disagree.
Yeah.
But the whole essence of a real profession is when people can look at the same thing and they may see something differently. And then by discussing that, both of them may come away with a new understanding about something. And I'll give a quick example of the significance of this. Again, I don't have the citation, so forgive me, but the story goes that a group of medical students had to do gross anatomy, and they had to dissect the ear. So the ear was always dissected this way in the body. And just for giggles and grins, this group of medical students said, "Hey, professor, can we dissect the ear this way?" And that wasn't the way it was done. So they did that, and they discovered new structures in the inner ear, because when it was done this way, the structures were destroyed. So by looking at the same physical thing just in a different way, we can get a new understanding of that structure.
I think it's
frozen. Are you still receiving me?
Well, you did freeze up there for
now. You're working again. Did you?
Yeah. So, do you have any other internet windows open, like Internet Explorer or Safari? If you have Safari open, close it. If you have any other browser windows open.
No, I shouldn't have. No.
Okay. All right. Because sometimes that'll bog it down.
Safari, yeah.
Or slow it down, because you don't need Safari open or Chrome or anything, because the Zoom runs on its own little piece of software there. You should see a little icon on the bottom of your MacBook that's kind of like a circle with a camera in the middle of it, and that's the Zoom app. And everything else on your iPad can be closed besides that. But as researchers, which both of us are, we certainly appreciate the value of looking at topics from multiple angles and multiple perspectives. But I want to acknowledge that not everyone appreciates an alternate view of how things are. That there are people who get locked onto their view, locked onto their belief, get stubborn-minded, and then instead of listening to what someone else has to say, an alternate point of view, they will label them a contrarian and dismiss what they have to contribute and close their mind off to it, and perhaps miss an opportunity to see that there is multiple perspectives. Like, the example of the dissection of the ear coming from a different angle, you see things differently. And I think that's a gift that you and I both have, is that we're probably the epitome of lifelong learners who realize that when we think we know it all, we would start to become dangerous minded. Right. And so I guess part of what our discussion here is maybe to try to get those who have been a little closed-minded and not open to alternate ways of looking at things, to see how you and I can have these discussions and discourse and sharing of various ideas in a way that remains courteous and professional, respectful, and in the spirit of learning, which is what we're here to do.
You're 100% right, Rich. That's why I was so comfortable and excited when you offered me the opportunity to come in and do this, because I think we do that. And even the fact that you acknowledged that when I reached out to you, I did it in a private conversation, a private first time. I didn't jump on you in public, all right? Because then your natural reaction would be to jump back, because you think I'm pushing on you, and that was not my intent. Yeah. So by doing it offline privately, because it's so hard when you're typing something to understand the person and to get the essence of what they're saying. But by doing it privately, that lets another dimension of communications to open up, and without causing friction right away. So I do that quite often. I rarely type in any kind of of negative or anything that can be taken negative on social media, because it can be so easily taken out of context. If I have a challenge with something or want more, I always do it offline first to give that person the opportunity to, and if they don't respond back, I just let it go. I mean, it's not my job to jump on people's, to throw water on people's post toasties. I mean, that's not my job. So I always do it as a way of learning about myself really first. So hopefully, and I think you took it that way too, that
Absolutely.
I was asking for kind of more information, and I appreciate the way you allowed that to happen. Yeah. So here's some of the foundation. And I think, and in the example you gave me back was about the firefighters that were ambushed and shot and killed, responding to a call.
Right.
So I completely agree that that's mostly unpreventable, but it's unpreventable the same way that a mailman going to the house and getting shot could be a victim, or a UPS driver bringing packages to a house could be shot. So not that the firefighters are UPS drivers or somebody else coming to the house. We're still firefighters and we're going to be a fire. But at that particular time, we become a crime victim. So we just happen to be the target of opportunity, or even if they're purposefully trying to shoot us, they're shooting us not because we're firefighters, they're shooting us because we represent the government or something. So I don't know. So if we make, and again, this is going to sound terrible, but if we see that as some kind of heroic act of getting shot, that's I don't see that as heroism. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy of society that we would think about doing that. Or it's a tragedy when an innocent child is killed in crossfire and you're not even shooting at the child, they're shooting at another gang member and a child gets struck with a stray bullet. We wouldn't think of the child as a hero. We would certainly think of them as a victim and sad, and we'd be angry. But there's nothing that child could do to prevent that. All right. There's nothing that mom and dad could do to prevent that. It's a bigger social kind of issue that we're just living in. So that's one aspect of it. Now, another one is if and again, I don't even know if I want to use this case because it's well known and it was a local case, and some firefighters went to check on somebody, and one got killed and one got wounded, and it was tragic. Well, I think if I remember right, the firefighter didn't have some of the firefighters didn't have identifiable gear on. They were not told that there were weapons in the house. They couldn't get in the house, so they had to force to get into the house. They didn't wait for the police officers to do those kind of things. So we do have, it was tragic that they got shot, one of them got shot and killed. But there are things that we could have followed in our own present procedures that may have had a different outcome. So I guess that's my concern when a firefighter is injured or killed. Are we doing everything we possibly can to find out if the institution, if we let that person down somehow? That's what I think is fundamentally the issue. That in the occupational field, when an employee is injured or killed, the responsibility is always 51% the employer, because I control that person's behavior. I control their environment. We don't blame the employee. Whereas in the fire service, when one of us gets killed or injured, we kind of see that as part of the job. That's what we do. We take risks. We are a risk organization. So when something bad happens, that's part of the job. And that's the fundamental philosophical challenge I think we face. As long as we continue to see occupational morbidity and mortality as part of the job, I don't know that we're really ever going to get to as close as possible to fixing it as we possibly can. Now, I know we can't fix it 100%. Nothing is 100%. But I do think we can do better.
Yeah.
And part of the issue is many times we only wait until there's some tragedy where somebody is seriously injured or dies that we put our resources to try to find out why. Those same level of resources should be put into every close call that you do, every near miss, not just reporting it, but finding out the same level of specificity of what went wrong at all levels to allow that to happen. And I don't know that we do that. You know, another aspect of that is just how the organization, I'm going to use the word disciplines incorrect behavior. So when an employee is doing something, they either did it 100% right or they didn't do it right. And at a certain point, when the level of not right gets so high, then the organization has to do something to correct it. Now you start asking those questions. Did the employee know how to do it the right way? Did they have the equipment and training to do it the right way? Or did they just choose not to do it the right way? And then how does the organization fix that? Do we actually fix the person's behavior? And the examples I use, and again, this is a gross analogy, and I know I'm comparing apples and oranges, but philosophically, I think it fits. You will see fire departments held accountable for inappropriate harassment behavior with hundreds of thousands of dollars in judgments against the organization because they didn't make sure the employee didn't do that. You never see that on safety violations. So why is it that society and organization hold us accountable for social misbehavior, but don't hold us accountable for the misbehavior or errors that can get us injured or killed? So that kind of all goes together. Now, I know I've been rambling, but that's the background to why I sent those messages to you, that if up front we say nothing could be done to fix this, I think a lot of our brothers and sisters out there jump on that and say, you know, I don't have to follow the rules and regulations. You know, it's my job to risk my life to go save people. And we just continue some of that dysfunction.
Okay. So I want to swing around to something that was part of that message that was on the social media, where I said there's a huge difference between assuming risk and creating risk. And I go further on to say we always assume the risk of the job, but there are too many out there who create risk because they lack training or experience, or they're consumed by the bravado, being perceived with being a hero at all costs. So I want to pause and just maybe put a frame around what I mean by the difference between assumed and created risk, and using the example of responding to a call with lights and sirens. Anytime we mount the vehicle, turn on the lights and sirens, and go down the road, there is a certain amount of risk that is greater than the risk of normal civilian driving. If for no other reason that the motoring public can do some pretty dumb things when they see us coming, and sometimes they don't even see us coming, and we are at an elevated level of risk from everyday living. That is the assumed risk of responding to an emergency in an emergency vehicle with lights and sirens. Then there is the created risk, doing the very same response with lights and sirens, but not wearing a seatbelt.
Right.
That is creating the risk that goes beyond what is acceptable. And what I had intended the message to be was that the assumed risk is just the risk that we just cannot negate, or if we can, I don't know how much effort and money it would take to create an environment where there would be no responder risk of injury or fatality. But as you know, Burt, there are too many injury and fatality incidents where it's not a result of assumed risk, but it's a result of created risk. Like those firefighters that went up and knocked on that door and got shot, unpredictable tragedy. But as soon as you decide to go up and knock on somebody's door, there's an assumed risk that you don't really know what's going to happen when that door gets opened. But then there might be a created risk of where you stand when or don't stand when you knock on the door, not waiting for the police to clear the scene, and just going in with the assumption that it's just another medical call. And so what I want to do is try to make the delineation between the risk that is just part of the kind of work that we do, and there is a risk of that, and then the risk that some of our brothers and sisters bring upon themselves by cheating the devil, shortcutting best practices, not following the rules with malice intent. Not that they don't have the right equipment or the right training. They do. They just don't want to follow the rules. The trucks have seat belts. They just don't want to wear them because they've got a really good reason, at least in their mind, as to why they don't need to or they shouldn't. But that's creating risk. I mean, you're literally rolling the dice and gambling with your well-being by that kind of risk. So I think we're on the same concept of this, but let's talk a little bit about your views on the created risk that responders bring upon themselves by doing things that just seem to be just, beyond what would be considered, best practice in our industry. And I'm sure as you see these line of duty death reports, you're seeing some of this. I see it in videos. I see it in reports. It doesn't necessarily always scream out that it was created risk, but you can see it's there.
And you're exactly right. I think the example of driving is very good. Some fire departments, well, here's an example of how it's changed in my time. When I was on the ambulance, we went red lights and siren to the call and red lights and siren to the hospital, regardless of what the event was. Well, the medical community decided, racing, once you pick up the patient and racing to the hospital, that doesn't make good sense because a lot of racing doesn't help the patient. So the people with MD after the name said, we're going to cut that stuff out. Here's the new guidelines in terms of you being able to respond red lights and siren to the hospital once you pick up the patient. So they understood your concept of assumed and created, and they realized we were creating risk by taking a priority 3 patient red lights and siren to the hospital. All right. So they organizationally and culturally, they changed our behavior. Some fire departments have started doing that too, where only the first unit dispatched on whatever the call is goes red lights and siren until they actually get there. All the other assigned units go normal traffic until it's determined, is it an emergency? Then they can always upgrade their response. So So we do know how to control these kind of things if we culturally decide we want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that all agencies are embracing the concept of controlling that risk of response. I'll share an example of, I've been retired for a little while yet now, but when I was active duty, I sent one of my command level officers to do a ride along with a large city fire department to just kind of immerse himself with command level officers and see what they do and how they do it and how they do the work they do. And he was in a station, and this station was dispatched. They dispatched the ladder company to change out the key in a Knox box, a key box. They responded lights and sirens to change out that key box. And when he asked, they justified it with an explanation that defied all explanation. Why would you create that risk, not only for you, but now for the motoring public? And how would you justify it if something bad happened? Where's the emergency in the emergency response to change out the key in a key box? Now, hopefully, it's been a few years. Hopefully that has changed over time. But I think there's still some departments out there, Burt, that are responding to things, lights and sirens, that really don't need to be, and treating things as emergencies that really aren't, all on the premise, well, it might be, and they create that risk. I mean, I'd like to think that it's changing, as we talk about response, and I think it is changing some places, but there are some places where it's not. We still see, even though with the National Seatbelt Initiative, you would think that wearing seatbelts would be so ubiquitous that you would never see a fire apparatus respond without everybody belted in, that they get it, that it's, one of the leading ways that we're going to get hurt and killed, responding to, returning from, and wear the seatbelt would be, low-hanging fruit, no-brainer. But then you see these announcements come out of apparatus accidents where they weren't belted and perhaps ejected from. So we're not there. They're still creating risk, even with the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit solutions. And if they're not wearing their seatbelt, this is my theory. If they're not wearing their seatbelt, if they can't control their behavior on that, the most simplest of risk reduction, then they're probably not taking it to a higher level with the greater potential risk things that are harder to implement and influence. When you can't get the easy one right.
Yes.
So
I agree. I agree 100%. Every NIOSH report should report out if everybody responding to the call wore their seatbelt. And if the answer is no, then the domino effect is beginning to take place. And I give the Fresno Fire Department credit when they did the investigation of the captain that fell through the roof. Quickly after that, they came out with 3 recommendations, one of which everybody's going to wear their seatbelt to the call, because they discovered that right away, that their firefighters weren't wearing their seatbelt to the call. So they got the message that starts that domino effect of things going wrong. And one fire chief one time, this has been a while ago, but one fire chief said to me, Burt, if we didn't go red lights and siren on everything, we wouldn't be an emergency service. So that's why when I saw your comment about this is unpreventable, I think people pick that up and they translate into, well, maybe I'm I'm wrong. But my first thing is, well, then I don't have to wear my seatbelt, because it's unpreventable. And I get those two things in my mind, and I use that to justify my other behavior that I let slide. Another quick example that goes back to that seatbelt thing, but I think it illustrates the issue. I was teaching a class, and a fire chief got a message, and at break he said, "Burt, I'd like to talk about this in class." So what had happened, companies had been dispatched for a building fire. The first due company was responding, and the battalion chief stopped his car to let the first due company go by, and he noticed that the guys in the back were standing up, putting on their gear. So he knew they didn't have their seatbelts on. So this battalion chief was telling the chief, "Look, once the call's over, those guys are going to get in trouble. I'm going to talk to the officer, and there may be discipline for this." So the fire chief was saying, "Yes, that's fine. Go right ahead." So then, so we talked about this, and we saw it as a positive thing. But since these were my students, I had to jack it up a little higher. So I said, let's change the scenario a little bit. So instead of the guy standing up, the compartment door in the back was open and stuff was falling out. What would you expect the battalion chief to do? Well, we'd expect the battalion chief to tell the engine, pull over and stop because you're dumping stuff on the street. You're making a danger. And we all agreed to that. I said, well, why can we protect stuff falling out, but why wouldn't we pull the fire truck over and make them put their seatbelt on? I mean, you're allowing that bad behavior to continue. That's the battalion chief's job, is to stop bad behavior when they see it right then and there, no matter what the bad behavior is. How about if the firefighters in the back were physically caressing each other in an inappropriate sexual manner? I'm sure the battalion chief would hopefully stop it right before they got to the call. Even if they were married, you shouldn't be doing it in the fire truck together, right? So that's how my brain works in terms of connecting the dots of when something bad happens, a lot of things had to be in place and allowed to happen to get to that injury or to get to that fatality. And then I don't think our present system is really robust enough to really keep it from happening again. Because when you read the cases, it's the same thing over and over and over again. Even when it comes to our health issues and our cancer issues. So we don't think it's heroic to die of cancer. We don't think it's heroic to die of a heart attack. But are we really doing stuff to fix those problems? Or are we creating systems that allow firefighters to come back to work, to allow firefighters to keep being exposed to these things just because we think we need to do this kind of stuff? So I'll be quiet now for a while. So
you raised a really good question in my mind. I'm anxious to hear your perspective on this. So, you said that, clearly gave an example of it being allowed to happen. So the question is, why is that? Why is it allowed to happen? Is it that the higher ups don't know that it's happening? They know that it's happening, but they're indifferent to it. They know it's happening, but they don't think they can make a change. They know it's happening, but they don't know how to change it. They know it's happening, but they don't want to push back against others and bring accountability. And don't say all of the above, because it might be all the above. But let's talk about maybe a few of why is this stuff allowed to happen?
Well, if you just look at the Joel Barker paradigm construct, all right, in terms of how people decide this is the right way to do something. At one point in time, we didn't think women should vote because they weren't smart enough to vote in elections. And so the women's movement lasted 80 years before women finally got the right to vote in 1920. But the women had been protesting and trying to get a constitutional amendment to allow women the right to vote. So society gets stuck on certain things. That's why I think that society is still stuck on the fact that when a firefighter dies, it's part of the job, and we treat it as if it's a hero. So what is the cultural motivation to keep it from happening? Now, it's not okay for women to be harassed at the workplace. Societies decide that. No matter what workplace you're in, you cannot harass women. So society holds the fire service and everybody accountable for harassment. But society does not hold the fire service accountable for firefighter injuries and fatalities. So what is the outside pressure, or what is the outside new information to help the fire service unfreeze? Because before you can change your paradigm, you have to unfreeze what you're presently doing. You have to see what you're doing as dysfunctional, not achieving your overall goals and objectives, or just fundamentally wrong at some level, and we have to fix it. And when it comes to firefighter injuries and fatalities, I don't know where the outside pressure is coming from for us to. We're better off than we were when you and I first joined, but to solve more of the problem, there has to be more of this unfreezing process. And whenever somebody says this death is unpreventable and it's a righteous death and it's heroic death, I think that lets us stay frozen.
So when you share the harassment example, I think of, and this is just maybe my way of looking at the world, that there are laws that protect people against harassment, and there really aren't any laws against firefighters doing some of the things that they do, or there's no laws that say that management has to bring accountability when a firefighter, if a firefighter harasses another employee, that the harassed employee has rights that can protect them. Where if a commander tells a firefighter to, go to a roof that's unsafe, that firefighter really doesn't have anything to protect them to speak back to their superior. In fact, they might get charged with insubordination if they didn't follow the order of a superior officer. In our aspect, I think it's more of a cultural thing than a legal thing.
Yes.
How do we shift that, Burt? Where do we?
Well, you have to at least have. Yeah. Sure. Right. You have to realize that it's an issue, and you're exactly right. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. Some states exempt firefighters and police officers when they're driving apparatus from being charged with negligence. In other words, a police officer or a firefighter can blow through a red light, kill people, and they can't be charged with negligence. So they're shielded against that. Then the laws cap the tort liability that the civilians can put against the government for those kind of things. So we've created, because we want to protect the firefighters, because society thinks that if the firefighters can't race to you, you're going to die in your house fire kind of stuff. So these are very big strategic issues that some of which the fire service itself can't fix. It needs to be a social discussion at the highest level of society so they can start thinking about these things. For example, one of the big legislative pushes right now, the fire service is to get presumptive cancer laws in their state legislatures. So the fire service is fighting hard to get that. But at the same time, are we fighting just as hard to get mandatory residential sprinkler systems in new occupancies? I don't see that. Mm-mm. And if you're a political scientist and say, well, you can't have two number one legislative priorities, I push back and say, yes, you can, because one is about saving us, the other is about saving the public, which intuitively saves us too, because we got to go in that environment. So, and people are uncomfortable when you have those kinds of discussions or bring those kind of things up to them, because it looks like you're really challenging their essence of who they are and what they think is important. And having uncomfortable conversations is not an easy thing to do, but that's the only way real change takes place.
So, out there in the world, I've had some conversations with firefighters who, even firefighters, speak disparagingly about sprinklers because they put the fire out too quick and then we don't get there to have fun with a big fire. I mean, it's a twisted kind of thinking, but it's out there, this whole, there are people the firefighters that would just despise the concept of doing fire prevention. We are firefighters, not fire preventers. There's no glory in the prevention of a fire. The glory is when we come out and our gear's smoking and so we have some internal I don't know what the word is. We have some internal issues with our own identity as to what our primary mission should be in the prevention of tragedy. Right. We have seemingly some have shifted their, or not maybe shifted, but locked into a lane of my job is to respond and deal with tragedy. My job is not in the prevention of tragedy.
Right. And I take it one step further, and I really do upset people when I say this, but if we want to take credit when we heroically save somebody, do we have to take responsibility when we don't? Because the house didn't have working smoke alarms. You can't take one without taking the other. And that's a philosophical, cultural mindset that not only the fire service, but the public has to see also. So I was just on a TV show lately, last week, and it was a news section that was an hour long. It was called Open Line down in Nashville. And I said, I've got some feedback for the news media, because when there's a fire, the news media wants to know how many people got injured, were there any injured firefighters, and how fast did the fire department get here? So once it has those answers, it doesn't ask any more questions. Would our culture change if another question was, when was the last time the fire department knocked on his door to make sure they had working smoke alarms? Because now it puts that responsibility on the firefighter and the fire service. Not just to wait to respond to the call, but to have some responsibility to make sure that person survived because they had working smoke alarms. So that's how I present new information and push the system to unfreeze it. Whether it's the fire service, the general public, the news media, the elected officials, the business community, that's my mission now, if you will, to start asking those questions to all those players, because they all have a piece in solving that American fire culture issue of changing the American fire culture. So that when these people, when this family of four died in this house, it's a tragedy, but something went wrong. Teddy bears are not going to solve the problem. You know, why didn't they have working smoke alarms? Who's more responsible for those, your children perishing in a fire, than mom and dad if you didn't have working smoke alarms? What level of responsibility would we put on mom and dad if there was a car accident and the kids died? Mom and dad survived, but the kids weren't in car seats. How would society view that differently than dying in a house fire? So that shows you the level at which we need to have these discussions. And I admit they're very difficult to have, but somebody's got to do it. And if it's not the fire service or somebody in the fire service, who's going to do it?
For sure. So as we're rounding toward an hour already, which I can't believe as I looked at the clock here, it's like, holy cow.
Wow.
Give us maybe, I don't want to cap the number, but I'll say 3 as a jump off point. 3 action items that you would like to see firefighters who listen to this show or watch it on YouTube. 3 action items you would want them to do to try to inspire the kind of change that you would want to see in the fire service culture.
Well, you know, big challenge. Number one, I think you always have to ask yourself, can I do this better? How can I do this better? And that's everything you do every day. All right? Because we all want to be better, and you have to believe I can be better. So how can I do this better? Number 2, we're going to work every day. Number 2, how can I make sure that my family, both the ones I live with and my close family, are as fire safe as possible? I went to my granddaughter's house a year or so ago. I hadn't seen her in a while. When I got in, the smoke detectors had been removed. And I wanted to know how long they had been like that, and it was weeks because they had been false alarming due to cooking or something was wrong with them. They hadn't fixed them. So I had to go to the store and buy some battery ones and install them, and then I kept calling every week until they got them fixed. All right? So that's the level of responsibility we take to fix those kinds of things when we see it. And then number 3, you know, listen to people that you disagree with, like Rich and Burt, and see if you can learn something from them, and then challenge yourself to say, why do I think this way? Why do I feel this way? And is there a better way to think and feel about this? I know it's not very technical, but it's not a technical problem. It's an adaptive problem that deals with values and feelings and emotion and beliefs, and those are the toughest things to fix. But that's where you need to do the work for yourself, your crew, your family, and your community. All right.
Well, that's a pretty good list. if somebody just took those 3 things and accomplished it, it would move the needle significantly.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show and chatting with me on the topic of firefighter risk, culture, and how we create a better, smarter fire service and maybe even a smarter society.
All right.
About the American fire culture. Burt, right. Thank you for being with me.
My pleasure, Doc. Thank you.
All right, we're back again. I stopped the recording too soon. We had an opportunity to have another quick discussion, and so we're back on the follow-up recording because I want to give Burt a chance to talk about the book, which was the subject of episode 38, but we're gonna plug it again here, Burt. So tell us about your book. What's it called and what's it about?
Okay, thanks, Rich. The title of the book is I Can't Save You, but I'll Die Trying, The American Fire Culture. And basically what it is, technically, it's an anthology. It's a collection of 45 of my best essays out of some 200 that I've written over my 40 plus years in the fire service. And I always wanted to write a book. And so this was the best way to do it. And it's put into chapters. The first chapter is about the American fire culture. Then there's a chapter about seatbelts, about May Day, about higher education, about best practices. And finally, there's some of my speeches in there. So when I wrote the book, I really wanted to do three things to put it on check off my bucket list that I wrote a book. But I wanted the book not only just to be read by the fire service, but to be read by non-fire people, particularly people in leadership positions, elected officials, corporate America, because they are part of the culture that then we have to live in. And if they don't change, they can't help us change. So one of the things we've done with the book is we've gifted it to the United States Congress. To my knowledge, it's the only book ever that was ever given to every congressman and senator. So we did it first to the 114th Congress. We gave it to all of them. Then the new 115th Congress, we gave it to the new members that came in. And now for the 116th, we're going to try it again. There's 101 representatives and 10 senators that we're going to try to get the book to. And I realize the congressmen and senators aren't going to read it, but hopefully somebody in their office will, so that they can see that their perception of what the fire service is may not be exactly correct in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. And that they have a responsibility for helping us change the American fire culture. We've also gifted it to many state legislatures. For example, we've given it to Ohio and Kansas. So if you want to give it to your Minnesota legislators, Rich, we can tell you all about that deal. Actually, maybe some of your sponsors would like to be part of that process, because we can put the sponsors' logos and information on the inside of the book when it's gifted to the state legislatures. Because so far it's been supported by FEMSA, the Fire Apparatus Manufacturers Association, and Fire and Emergency Services Association. So those two organizations, their members have sponsored the book. So that's what we're doing with the book. It's available on Amazon. I go to conferences and stuff. I do speeches about it in terms of public speeches open to the public, elected officials, corporate executives, those people that really decide how the culture of a community is going to be. Then I have a 4-hour workshop that I do for fire departments, very much like yours, about Situation Matters. And I've actually stolen your line. I say culture matters sometimes.
I think we froze up. Hold on. I'm back. You're froze up.
Rich, you've locked up.
Yeah. we're back now.
Okay. Did you get any of what I said?
Yeah. I got that you kind of froze right where you said you do a 4-hour fire department program. So you can cover everything after that.
I can repeat it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have a 4-hour fire department workshop where I have them, I look at the fire culture, and then the takeaway is that I believe that people can change their behavior. And by changing behavior, that ultimately changes the culture. So the organization walks away with a to-do list, what they're going to start doing that they haven't been doing. They're going to stop doing what they shouldn't be doing. And they're going to keep doing what they should be doing. Stop, start, and keep in terms of our behavior. And when we do it enough, that becomes the new culture. From the rookie to the fire chief, it's the same. It's just the perspectives that you have to look at. And I do believe that we can all do better if we want to.
Mm-hmm. Now, if somebody wants to find you, how do they find you?
Okay, my website is www.americanfireculture.com. There's all kinds of free material on there, free videos, articles and stuff. Everything on the website's free. So please feel free to do that. You can contact me through there, or my email address is Dr. Clark, Dr. Burt Clark, @gmail.gov. So those ways they can reach out to me and talk or hook up a connection or however I can help.
You said gmail.gov. Did you mean gmail.com?
Yes, I'm sorry, gmail.com, yes. I can't get rid of my government mind. Gmail.com, yes.
Yeah, okay. I was like, wow, Gmail went all government on us? Yeah.
Especially after the shutdown, right? Now Gmail's taking over everything, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, so I'll be sure to include the website and your email in the show notes as well. So thanks for swinging back and picking up on the book. And so we'll cut it off again. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, for being my guest and for sharing your thoughts with our audience today. Well, I never thought we'd make it this far, but we did. Our show is fast approaching its 5th anniversary, and I'm very proud that we are the longest running, consistently broadcasted, independently operated show focused on a singular mission to improve the safety and survival of individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. Let me pause for a minute and elaborate on one component of that last statement. Consistently broadcasted. A new episode of this show has been released every Tuesday, and for the past 5 years, I've not missed putting out a new episode on a Tuesday yet. Never. Ever. No other podcaster in this space can make that claim. In fact, most podcasters fade out after a dozen or so episodes, or they become very inconsistent with airing new episodes. Not me. You can set your clock by the release of a new episode of this show. Every Tuesday morning, you're going to get a fresh, new show to watch or listen to. It's my promise to you. Now, I have to admit, it's not always an easy promise to keep. My travel schedule means that there are times I'm recording and or editing this show well after midnight on a Monday night, because I know I have to keep my promise to you to have that episode ready by 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. And I totally understand why other podcasters fade out or are inconsistent. It can be lonely here behind the microphone or the camera. And by lonely, I mean that we, podcasters or videocasters, rarely get any feedback from you, the viewers and the listeners. Sure, we see the stats that our episodes have been getting thousands of downloads and views, but rarely does anyone ever take the time to write a review or to send me an email with some feedback about the show. So I really rarely know if the show is inspiring others or it's not. But I keep on keeping on, and I'll continue to put out the best possible safety-focused content that I can. Now, to honor those who are watching and listening to the show, I'm going to do a giveaway of products from our sponsors and supporters. So listen to the upcoming episodes and watch the SAMatters.com website for more on that. The Situational Awareness Matters show was launched in 2014 with a purpose to give a platform to those who have had near-miss events to share their stories, just like the one you just listened to. When I'm on the road, I'm delivering classes on situational awareness, and I often ask the attendees about their near-miss events that they've had, and they share with me some amazing stories. It's these stories, like the one you listened to with Devin Farmer and John Buckman from German Township, that motivates me to launch this podcast, and so those lessons can be shared with a bigger audience. The Situational Awareness Matters show, podcasted as SA Matters Radio, and our companion video program, SA Matters TV channel on YouTube, along with other videos that we've posted there, have enjoyed over 800,000 100,000 downloads. That number just blows my mind and far exceeds all my expectations. I'm so thankful for your support, and I feel so honored to be able to provide this platform for those who have those amazing stories to be shared. If you like our show, please do me a solid favor. Subscribe. For the audio version, you can subscribe to SAMatters Radio on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or iHeartRadio. For the video version, subscribe to SAMatters TV on YouTube. And if you find the value in the show, I'd really appreciate it if you'd give the show a rating and write a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show, and more importantly, your feedback inspires me to work even harder for you.
Real expectations, because SA matters.
Know your limit. Know your partner's limit, because SA matters.
Assumptions are bad. SA matters.
Proper PPE is important, because SA matters.
Flawed situational awareness is a really big deal. SA matters.
Know your water supply, because SA matters.
Bears and Cougars. SA matters.
Go versus no go, because SA matters.
Confidence is good. Overconfidence is bad. SA matters.
Buddies matter, because SA matters.
SA matters. So don't get angry.
When the pigs are eating lemons, SA matters.
Our academy class is going home today because we know that SA matters.
SA matters!
Since 2007, Situation Awareness Matters instructors have helped over 1,300 organizations and have trained more than 75,000 individuals on how to improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, public transportation operators, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence, decision-making environment, then we're here to help improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love you.
This is so stressful, okay? I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Rich Gasaway for something. I'm not really sure what it is. It has something to do with podcasts, which what is a podcast? And his message does suck. Oh my God, situational awareness. What the hell? I mean, suck it up, Buttercup. I mean, are you kidding me? We've got to be situationally aware. Why don't you open your eyes and look around? 360 degrees, that's all you got to do.
I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Toledo Fire Department in Toledo, Ohio. The White Court Fire Department in White Court, Alberta, who hosted a live stream training program where I came by the internet and trained their people in their training room. The Missouri Winter Fire School in Columbia, Missouri. The Topeka Fire Department in Topeka, Kansas. Now, if you're interested in where we're going to be upcoming, here's what the schedule looks like. On February 22nd, we'll be at the West Virginia Emergency Services Conference in Pipestem, West Virginia. February 25, the International Falls Fire Department in International Falls, Minnesota. February 26th, the Grand Rapids Fire Department in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. February 27th, the Eveleth Fire Department in Eveleth, Minnesota. February 28th, the Lutsen Fire Department in Lutsen, Minnesota. March 5 through 7, the Baytown Fire Department in Baytown, Texas. March 8th, the Ponderosa Fire Department in Houston, Texas. March 9, the Northwest Volunteer Fire Department, also in Houston, Texas. March 12th, the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Towson, Maryland. March 25 to April 3 at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Oahu, Hawaii. April 11th at the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana. April 14 through 16, the Washington Fire Training Officers Association Conference in Wenatchee, Washington. April 25, the International Association of Fire Chiefs Company Officer Leadership Series in Atlanta, Georgia. April 27, the Cook County Emergency Management Agency Seminar in Grand Marais, Minnesota. April 30 to May 1, the New Hanover County Fire Officers Development Seminar in Wilmington, North Carolina.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they respond to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that you just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. But I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
If you want to see the locations of all the upcoming events, just head over to the SAMatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SAMatters.com homepage and I will give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there are several ways that you can do that. Check the show notes for how to get connected with us by signing up for our monthly newsletter, by subscribing to the SA Matters radio podcast, by subscribing to the SA Matters TV YouTube channel, and how to follow us on the social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 252 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you to my guest, Dr. Burt Clark. Thank you to our awesome sponsor, Midwest Fire. If you're in the market for a pumper tanker, or a brush truck, check them out at MidwestFire.com. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, organizations, and associations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted the live stream training programs, where I come to your organization live via the internet to train your members. Thank you to the more than 2,500 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. The feedback I receive from Academy graduates is amazing and quite humbling. Thank you for that. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.